Hi and welcome back to Sadie's Spincraft. Welcome to another episode of Spin and Storytime. In this episode, we will be doing chapters 17 and 18. We are spinning up the BFL silk that we dyed at the beginning of I think it was December or middle of November. I hope you all enjoy this. There will be a finished yarn at the end of it. So, yeah, here goes. Chapter 17. Standing next to the two oversized soldiers, I felt like a plum wedged between a couple of cantaloupes. Misgivings crept into my mind. The notion that I could defend myself against someone of Harry's build seemed ridiculous. If he wanted, he could pick me up and throw me over his shoulder, and there was nothing I could do about it. Okay, first, we'll start with some self-defense, Harry explained. No weapons until the basic moves are instinctive. You're better off fighting hand to hand than wielding a weapon you don't know how to use. A skilled opponent would simply disarm you, then your troubles would be doubled. Not only would you be under attack, but you'd have to counter your own weapon. Harry leaned his practiced sword next to Janko's, scanning the training yard. Most of the soldiers were gone, but small clumps of men still worked. What are your strengths? Harry said. Strengths? What are you good at? Janko, sensing my confusion, prompted, Are you fast? Are you a fast runner? That's a handy skill. Oh, I finally understood. I'm flexible. I used to be an acrobat. Perfect! Coordination and agility are excellent skills, and Harry grabbed me around the waist. He threw me high into the air. My limbs flailed a moment before instinct kicked in. Still in midair, I tucked my chin, arms and legs close to my body, executed a somersault to align myself, and landed on my feet, wobbling to regain my balance. Outraged, I turned on Harry before I could demand an explanation. He said, Another advantage of having acrobatic training is the ability to stay on your feet. That manoeuvre of yours could mean the difference between life and death. Right, Janko? Janko rubbed the vacant spot where the lower half of his right ear used to be. It helps. You know who else would make a great fighter? Harry's shoulders sagged, as if he knew what Janko was going to say next and resigned himself to it. Intrigued, I asked, Who? A dancer. With the proper training, the fire dancers at the festival could take on anyone. With a blazing staff spinning around, I wouldn't go near one with any weapon. Except a pail of water, Harry countered. He and Janko then launched into an intense argument, debating the technical aspects of a fight against a fiery staff wielded by an enraged dancer. Although fascinated by the discussion, I had to interrupt them. My time was limited. The commander's dinner would soon be served. With only occasional sarcastic comments about fire dancers, Harry and Janko spent the remainder of my first lesson teaching me to block punches, then kicks, until my forearms were numb. Harry halted the exercise when another soldier approached. His and Janko's relaxed postures tightened. They shifted to defensive stances as Nix, the guard from Captain Parfait's unit, came closer. The skin on Nick's bald head was sunburned, and his thin fringe of black hair lay damply on his forehead. An overpowering stench of body odour preceded him, gagging me. His lean muscles reminded me of a slender coil of rope, dangerous when pulled tight. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Nix demanded. "That's what the hell do you think you're doing, sir?" Janko corrected him. "We outrank you, and I think a salute would be a nice touch." Nix sneered. "You'll lose your promotion when your boss finds out you're associating with a criminal. Whose brainless idea was it to make her into a more effective killer? When another dead body shows up, you'll be accomplices." Janko took a menacing step toward Nix, but Harry's meaty hand on his shoulder stopped him. With undertones of a threat laced into his voice, Harry said, "What we do with our free time is none of your business. Now, why don't you shuffle off to Parfait? I saw him heading towards the latrines. He'll need you to wipe his ass soon. It's the one skill you're most suited for." Nix was outnumbered, but he couldn't resist a parting shot. "She has a history of killing her benefactor. I'd watch my necks if I were you." Harry's and Janko's eyes stayed on Nick's backs until he left the yard. Then they turned to me. "That's a good start," Harry said, ending the lesson. "See you tomorrow at dawn." "What about Nix?" I asked. "No problem. We can take care of him." Harry shrugged it off confidently in his ability to deal with Nix. I envied Harry's self-assurance and physical power. I didn't think I could handle Nix, and I wondered if there was another reason besides killing Rayad that made Nix hate me. "I taste the commander's breakfast at dawn," I said. "Then right after." "What for?" I asked. "The soldiers run laps around the compound to keep in shape," Janko answered. "Join them," Harry said. "Do at least 5 circuits, more if you're able. We'll increase the amount until you've caught up to us. How many laps do you run?" 50. I gulped. As I returned to the castle, I thought of the work and time I would need to devote to training. Learning self-defense would require the same commitment I had applied to my acrobats. I couldn't go halfway. It had seemed like a good idea at the time. I had been giddy with fairy tale visions of easily fighting off Brazil's guards, but the more I thought about it, the more I realised this wasn't something to do on a whim. I wondered if I would be better off spending my time learning about poisons and magic. In the end, all the physical training in the world wouldn't save me from Iris's magical powers. My feet dragged on the ground and my body felt as if it were pulling a wagon full of stones. Why couldn't I just go for it? Why was I constantly considering each option, searching both sides of an argument for gaps in the logic, like somersaulting on the trampoline, plenty of ups and downs, but no forward motion? I longed for the days when a wrong decision wouldn't cost me my life. By the time I reached the commander's office, I had concluded that I had other enemies besides the magician, and being able to defend myself might save my life some day. Knowledge, whatever the form, could be as effective as a weapon. Soon after I arrived, one of the tutors bustled into the office, dragging a young girl with him. At age 12, every child was assigned a profession based on their capabilities, and then they were sent to the appropriate tutor for 4 years to learn. The tutors read uniform had black diamonds stitched on the collar, making it direct opposite of the advisor's black uniform. The girl wore the simple red jumper of a student. Her brown eyes were shining with unshed tears. Her facial expression alternated between terror and defiance as she battled to compose herself. I guessed she was about 15 years old. "What's the problem, Bevan?" the commander asked, annoyance tainting his voice. "This disobedient child is a constant disruption to my class." "In what way?" "Maya is a know-it-all. She refuses to solve mathematical problems in the traditional manner and has the gall to correct me in front of the entire class." "Why are you here?" "I want her disciplined, whipped preferably, and reassigned as a servant." Bevan's request caused silent tears to spill down Maya's cheeks, although she maintained her composure, which was impressive for someone so young. The commander steepled his fingers, considering. I cringed for the girl. Having her tutor bother the commander for this dispute would not help her. Bevan must have gone over the training coordinator. "I'll handle it," the commander finally said. "You're dismissed." Bevan wavered for a moment, opening and closing his mouth several times. His pinched expression revealed that this was not the response he had expected. Nodding stiffly, he left the office. The commander pushed his chair away from the desk and gestured Maya to come around. Now eye level with her, he asked, "What's your side of the story?" With a thin, quivering voice, she answered, "I'm good with numbers, sir." She hesitated as if expecting to be corrected for making a bold statement, but when none came, she continued, "I was bored solving mathematical problems Tutor Bevan's way, so I invented new and faster ways. He's not good with numbers, sir." Again she stopped, flinching as though she was anticipating a blow. "I made the mistake of pointing out his errors. I'm sorry, sir. Please don't whip me, sir. I'll never do it again, sir. I'll follow Tutor Bevan's every command." Tears flowed down her bright pink cheeks. "No, you won't," the commander replied. Terror gripped the girl's face. "Relax, child. Yelena." Startled, I spilled some of his tea I had been holding his tray. "Yes, sir." "Fetch Advisor Watts." "Yes, sir." I put the tray on the desk and hurried through the door. I had met Watts once. He was the commander's accountant, who had given me the money I had earned playing fugitive. He was working at his desk, but immediately followed me back to the office. "Watts, do you still need an assistant?" the commander asked. "Yes, sir," Watts replied. "Maya, you have 1 day to prove yourself. If you don't dazzle Advisor Watts with your mathematical skills, then you'll have to return to Bevan's class. If you do, then you can have the job. Agreed?" "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Maya's pretty face was radiant as she trailed behind Watts. I marvelled at the commander. Being compassionate, hearing Maya's side of the story, and giving her a chance were the exact opposite of how I imagined the encounter would play out. Why would a man with such power take the time to go that extra step? He risked upsetting Bevan and the coordinator. Why would he bother to encourage a student? His stack of reports reclaimed the commander's attention, so I slipped out the door, heading toward the library to continue my research. After a while, the sun began to set. I picked out a promising botany book to take with me, as I was reluctant to have a lantern light betray my presence in the library. The candlelight cast a dismal glow in the corridors. I watched my shadow glide along the walls as I headed for Valak's suite. wondering if I should move back into my old rooms in the servants' wing. Now that Brazil was gone, there was no logical reason for me to remain with Valak, but the thought of living in that small room where I wouldn't have anyone to argue with or to discuss poisoning methods with left a hollow feeling inside me, that same empty pang I'd been having on and off for the last 4 days. Only the cold darkness greeting me when I entered Valak's suite. My disappointment surprised me, and I realised I had been missing him. I shook my head at the foreign concept. Me? Missing Valak? No, I couldn't allow myself to think that way. Instead, I focused on my survival. If I wanted to discover an antidote to butterfly's dust, paging through books on counteracting poisons while sitting in Valak's living room wouldn't be the smartest idea. Of course, the decision might not be mine to make. Once Valak found out Brazil had gone, he'd probably order me back to my rooms anyway. After I had lit the lanterns in Valak's suite, I relaxed on the couch with the botany book. Biology had never been a favourite subject of mine, and I soon found my mind wandering. My weak efforts to remain focused were lost to my daydreams. A muffled slam brought my attention back to the present. It sounded like a book hitting the floor. I glanced down, but my volume remained in my lap, open to a particularly boring passage about fruit trees. I scanned the living room to see if one of Valak's untidy piles of books had fallen over. Sighing at the mess, I couldn't tell if anything had toppled or not. A frightening thought crept into my mind. Maybe the noise had come from upstairs. Maybe it had been a book, but had not been a book, but a person. Someone sneaking in to wait until I fell asleep to kill me. Unable to sit still, I grabbed a lantern and dashed into my room. My backpack rested on the bureau. Rand hadn't asked for his knife yet, so I hadn't returned it. Pulling the blade from the pack, Harry's words about misusing a weapon flew through my mind. It was probably foolish to take the knife, but I felt more confident with it in my hand. Armed, I returned to the living room and considered my next move. Sleep would be impossible tonight until I investigated the upstairs rooms. Blackness from above pressed down on my meagre light as I ascended the staircase. Curving to the right, the stairs ended in the sitting room. Piles of boxes, books and furniture were scattered throughout the room in a haphazard fashion, casting odd shapes, shadows on the walls. I manoeuvred with caution around the heaps. My blood slammed into my heart as I shone my lantern into dark corners, searching for an ambush. A flash of light caused a yip to escape my lips. I spun only to discover it was my own lantern reflecting in the tall, thin windows that stripped the far wall. 3 rooms were located to the right of the sitting room chamber. A quick, heart-pumping check of the box-filled rooms revealed they were empty for ambushes and identical to the 3 off the downstairs living area. To the left of the upstairs sitting area was a long hallway. Doorways lined the right side of the corridor opposite a smooth stone wall. The hall ended in a set of locked double wooden doors. Carved into the ebony wood was an elaborate hunting scene. By the thin coating of white powder on the floor beneath the door, I guessed this was the entrance to Valak's bedroom. The powder would show footprints, alerting Valak to an intruder. I breathed easy, seeing the powder undisturbed. As I systematically checked the remaining rooms along the corridor, the growing realization that Valak was a true pack rat struck me. I had always imagined assassins as creatures of the dark, travelling light and never staying in one place for too long. Valak's suite resembled the house of an old married couple who had filled their rooms with all the things they had collected over the years. Distracted by these thoughts, I opened the last doorway. It took me some time to properly register what I saw. Compared to the others, the room was barren. One long table lined the back wall, centred underneath a large teardrop-shaped window. Grey rocks streaked with white, the same stones I had been tripping over in Valak's living room and office for the past month and a half, were arranged by size on the floor. A thick layer of dust scrunched under my boots when I walked into the room. On the table, carving chisels, metal sanding files, and a grinding wheel occupied the only dust-free spots. Small statues in various stages of creations were interspersed amongst the tools. To my delight, I realised that the grey rock, when carved and polished, metamorphosed into a beautiful lustrous black, with the white streaks transformed into brilliant silver. Setting the lantern on the table, I picked up a finished butterfly, with silver spots sparkling from its wings. It fit into the palm of my hand. The detail was so exquisite that it appeared the butterfly might beat its wings and lift into the air at any moment. I admired the other statues. The same devoted care had been applied to each. Lifelike animals, insects, and flowers lined the table. Apparently, nature provided the artist's favourite subject. Stunned, I realised Valak must be the artist. Here was a side of Valak I never imagined existed. I felt as though I had intruded upon his most personal secret, as if I had uncovered a wife and children living up here in happy seclusion, complete with a family dog. I had noticed the figurines on Valak's desk, and at least once a day I glanced at the snowcat in the commander's office, attempting to understand why he had selected that particular statue for display. I now understood its significance. Valak had carved it for the commander. The shuffle of feet made me whirl around. A black shape rushed me. My knife was yanked from my grasp and pressed against my neck. Fear clenched my throat tight, suffocating me. The familiar feeling triggered a sudden flashback of soldiers disarming and dragging me off Rayad's dead body, but Valak's face showed mirth instead of wrath. "Snooping?" Valak asked, stepping back. With effort, I banished my fear, remembering to start breathing again. "I heard a noise and I came to investigate." Valak finished my sentence. "Searching for an intruder is different from examining statues." He pointed with the knife to the butterfly clutched in my hand. "You were snooping." "Yes." "Good. Curiosity is a commendable trait. I wondered when you would explore up here. Find anything interesting?" I held up the butterfly. "It's beautiful." He shrugged. "Carving focuses my mind." I placed the statue on the table, my hand lingering over it. I would have enjoyed studying the butterfly in the sunlight. Grabbing the lantern, I followed Valak from the room. "I really did hear a noise," I said. "I know. I knocked a book over to see what you would do. I didn't expect a knife, though. Is it the one missing from the kitchen? Did Rand report it? I felt betrayed. Why hadn't he just asked for it back? No, it just makes sense to keep track of large kitchen knives, so when one goes missing, you're not surprised when someone attacks you with it. Valak handed the knife back. You should return it. Knives won't help you against the calibre of people after you. Valak and I descended the stairs. I lifted the botany book from the couch. What does the commander think of the pods? Valak asked. He thinks they're from Sitia. He returned them to me so I could discover what they are. I've been doing research in the library. I showed Valak the book. He took it from me and flipped through the pages. Find anything? Not yet. Your actions as a fugitive must have impressed the commander. Normally he would have assigned this sort of thing to one of his science advisors. Valak's words made me uncomfortable. I wasn't convinced that I could discover the origin of the pods and beans. The idea of failing the commander made me queasy. I changed the subject. Where did the caravans go? Valak paused, undecided. Finally, he said Brazil's new factory. If Valak had been surprised by his discovery, it didn't show on his face. It occurred to me that despite all the discussion about Brazil's permit, I didn't know what he was planning to make. What's the product? It's supposed to be a feed mill. Valak handed the book back to me. And I don't know why he would need those pods and beans. Maybe they're a secret ingredient. Maybe they're added to the feed to enhance the cow's milk supply. Then every farmer would buy Brazil's feed instead of growing his own, or something along that line. Or maybe not. I'm not an expert. Valak pulled at his hair. I'll have to study his permit to see what is missing. Either way, I assigned some of my corps to stake out the route and infiltrate the factory. At this point, I need more information. Brazil left the castle this afternoon. I passed his retinue on my way back. Good, one less thing to worry about. Valak crossed to his desk and began sorting through his papers. I watched his back for a while, waiting. He didn't mention my moving out. I finally worked up the nerve to ask, should I return to my room now Brazil's gone? I berated myself for my choice of words. Should I have been firmer? But it was too late. Valak stopped. I held my breath. No, he said. You're still in danger. The magician hasn't been dealt with yet. His pen resumed its course over the paper. Strong relief flushed through my body like a hot wave, alarming me. Why did I want to stay with him? Remaining was dangerous, illogical, and by every argument I could muster, the worst situation for me. The book on magic was still hidden in my backpack, which went with me everywhere because I feared Valak would pull one of his stunts and surprise me. Damn it, I thought, angry at myself, as if I didn't have enough to worry about. I shouldn't miss Valak. I should try harder to escape. I shouldn't figure out the bean puzzle. I should sabotage it. I shouldn't admire and respect him. I should vilify him. Shouldn't. So easy to say, but so hard to believe. Exactly how do you deal with a magician? I asked. He turned around in his seat and looked at me. I've told you before. But their powers. But their powers have no effect on me. When I get close, I can feel their power pressing and vibrating on my skin, and moving toward them is like walking through thick syrup. It takes effort, but I always win in the end. Always. How close? Valak had been in the castle both times I had unknowingly used magic. did Valak suspect? I have to be in the same room, Valak said. Relief washed through me. He didn't know, at least not yet. Why didn't you kill the southern magician at the festival? I asked. Yelena, I'm not invincible. Fighting 4 men while she threw every ounce of her power at me was exhausting. Chasing her down would have been a fruitless endeavour. I thought about what he said. Is being resistant to magic a form of magic? I asked. No. Valak's face hardened. What about the knife? I pointed to the long blade hanging on the wall. The crimson blood gleamed in the lantern light. In the 3 weeks I'd lived in Valak's suite, it hadn't dried. Valak laughed. That was the knife I used to kill the king. He was a magician. When his magic couldn't stop me from plunging that knife into his heart, he cursed me with his dying breath. It was rather melodramatic. He willed that I should be plagued with the guilt of his murder and have his blood stain my hands forever. With my particular immunity to magic, the curse attached itself to the knife instead of me. Valak looked at the weapons all thoughtfully. It was a shame to lose my favourite blade, but it does make for a nice trophy. Chapter 18. My lungs blazed. Flushed and sweat-soaked, I lagged behind the main group of soldiers, my throat burning with every gasp. It was my 4th lap around the castle complex. 1 more to go. I had hovered by the north-east barracks right after tasting the commander's breakfast. When a large clump of soldiers ran past, I spotted Harry, who waved me over to join in. I worried that the other guards would resent my presence, but there were servants, stable boys, and other castle workers mixed in with the soldiers. The first 2 laps quickened my pulse and shortened my breath. Pain began in my feet during the 3rd lap and travelled up my legs by the 4th. My surroundings blurred until all I saw was the small patch of ground right in front of me. When I limped to my finishing point, ending my agony, I found a thick row of hedges and threw up my breakfast of sweet cakes. Straightening, I saw a grinning Janko give me a thumbs up as he jogged by. He didn't even have the decency to look winded, and his shirt was still dry.
As I wiped vomit off my lip, Harry paused beside me. Training yard, 2 o'clock. See you then, he said. But, I said to nobody as Harry jogged away. I could hardly stand. I couldn't imagine doing anything more strenuous. In the training yard that afternoon, Harry and Janko leaned against the fence watching two men sparring with swords. The loud ring of metal striking metal echoed. The fighters had drawn the attention of every soldier. I realised with surprise that one of the men was Valak. I hadn't seen him since early that morning, and I had assumed he was resting after being up late the night before. Valak was liquid in motion. As I watched him, one word came to mind: beautiful. His movements had the speed and cadence of a complex dance performance. In comparison, his adversary resembled a newborn colt, lurching and jerking his arms and legs as if this were his first time on his feet. Valak's smooth lunges and graceful parries disarmed his opponent in no time. Pointing with his sword, he sent his beaten foe to a small group of men and motioned for another to attack. What's going on? I asked. Valak's challenge, Janko said. What's that? Valak has declared a challenge to anyone in Ixia. Beat him in a fight with the weapon of your choice or hand to hand, and you can be promoted to his second in command. Harry gestured to Valak, now engaged in combat with a third man. It's become a sort of graduation for basic training for the soldiers to fight Valak at least once. Although you can try as many times as you like, the captains watch the matches and recruit the more promising soldiers. And if you manage to impress Valak with your skills, he may offer you a post in his elite intelligence corps. How did you guys do? I asked. Okay, Harry demurred. Okay, Janko snorted. Harry came close to beating him. Valak was pleased, but Harry would rather be a scout than a spy. I want all or nothing, Harry said with a quiet intensity. We continued to watch. Harry and Janko made technical comments about the different fights, but I couldn't tear my eyes from Valak. With the sunlight glinting off his sword, he dispatched two more men. He tapped them with the flat of his sword, the flat of his weapon, just to let them know he had broken through their defences without shedding any blood. The next opponent approached with a knife. Bad choice, Harry said. Valak put down his sword and unsheathed his blade. The match was over in 2 moves. Valak excels in knife fighting, Janko commented. The last challenger was a woman. Tall and agile, she wielded a long wooden staff. Harry called it a bow. She held her own against Valak, and their sparring lasted longer than any of the previous 6 fights. With a loud crack, her bow snapped in two, ending the match. As the crowd dispersed, Valak spoke with the woman. That's Marion, Harry said. If she doesn't disappear into Valak's corps, you should ask her to teach you the bow. With your smaller size, it would extend your reach against a taller attacker. But you can't conceal a bow, I said. Not around the castle, but if you're hiking through the woods, you wouldn't look out of place holding a walking stick. I looked at Marion and considered the possibilities. Would she agree to help me? Probably not. What would she stand to gain? As if reading my thoughts, Harry said, Marian's aggressive and encouraging. Every new female recruit gets her personal attention, whether they want it or not. Since so many women fail due to the rigors of training, she tries to coach them through. We've more women in the guard now than ever before because of her. We tried to get her to teach us a bow would make a good weapon for a scout, but she has no interest in training men. But I'm not a new recruit, I'm the food taster. Why would she waste her time with me? I might be dead by tomorrow. Aren't we grumpy today? Janko said cheerfully. Too much exercise this morning. Shut up, I said, unfazed. His grin only widened. All right, that's enough. Let's get started, Harry said. I spent the rest of the afternoon learning to punch someone without breaking my hand and practicing the proper technique of kicking. The first two knuckles of both hands turned bright red as I punched into a training bag over and over. Mastering the front kick was a challenge since my stiff thigh muscles hindered my flexibility. When Harry finally dismissed me, I aimed my battered body towards the castle. See you in the morning, Janko said with a cheerful sound in his voice. I turned to tell him where to stick it and came face to face with Valak. I held my breath. He had been watching us. I felt self-conscious. Your punches are slow, he said. Taking my hand, he examined the bruises, which were starting to turn purple. At least your technique is good. If you hold weights in your hands while you train, your punches will be much quicker without them. I can continue? I asked in disbelief. He still held onto my hand, and I couldn't summon the willpower to pull it back. The warmth of his touch coursed through my body, temporarily vanquishing my aches and pains. With the memory of his stunning physical display fresh in my mind, I gazed at his strong face. His flashing and dangerous blue eyes had always taken my attention. I had learned to read his facial expressions as a survival tactic, but I had never really looked at him in this way before. He was a sturdy in contradiction. He was a sturdy in contradiction. Okay. The man who carved delicate statues was also capable of disarming 7 opponents without breaking a sweat. My interactions with Valak resembled a performance on the tightrope. 1 minute I was confident and balanced, and the next insecure and unstable. I think it's an excellent idea, he said. How did you get the Power Twins to agree to teach you? Power Twins? Combine Harry's strength with Janko's speed and they would be unbeatable. But so far I haven't had to test my theory, since they haven't tried to fight me together. No one said I couldn't have more than 1 second in command. You're not going to give me away, are you? No. Valak gave my hand a small squeeze and then released his grip. Good. They're probably the best instructors at the castle. How did you meet them? They were the 2 men who found me in the forest. The commander promoted them, and I took advantage of their gratitude. My hand tingled where he had touched it. Opportunistic and underhanded. I love it, Valak laughed. He was in a good mood as he walked beside me to the castle. Probably a rush from beating so many opponents. Before we reached the east entrance, he stopped. There's one problem. My heartbeat increased to double time. What? You shouldn't train so visibly. Word spreads quickly. If Brazil finds out and makes a fuss, the commander will order you to stop, and it'll make the commander suspicious. We entered the cool, dark air of the castle. It was a relief to be out of this hot sun. Why don't you make use of all those empty storerooms in the lower level of the castle? You can still run laps in the morning for exercise, Valak said. Great, I thought sarcastically. Jogging was the one aspect of training I would have been willing to give up. However, Valak was right. Working with Ari and Janko in the middle of the yard had already attracted negative attention, mainly Nick's, whose scowls and nasty glares burned on my skin. Valak was quiet as we travelled through the castle. I was headed to the commander's office to taste his dinner. He walked with me. Mentioning Brazil reminds me that I've been wanting to ask you about the Creolio that the commander enjoys. Do you like the taste of it? I chose my words with care. Yes, it's an excellent dessert. If you stopped eating it, how would you feel? Well, I hesitated, unsure where this conversation was leading. Truthfully, I would be disappointed. I look forward to eating a piece every morning. Have you ever craved the Creolio? Valak inquired. I finally understood where his pointed questions were leading. Like an addiction? He nodded. I don't think so, but what? I only eat it once a day. The commander has a piece after each meal, including his evening snack. With why this sudden concern? I asked. Just a feeling. It might be nothing. Valak was silent during the rest of the trip. Well, Valak, my new promotions. The commander asked. Well, Valak, any new promotions? The commander asked as we entered his office. No, but Marion shows promise. Unfortunately, she doesn't want to be in my corps or even be my second. She just wants to beat me. Valak grinned, delighted by the challenge. And can she? The commander inquired, his eyebrows rose. With time and the proper training, she's deadly with her bow. It's just her tactics that need work. Then what do we do with her? Promote her to general and retire some of the old wingbags. We could use some fresh blood in the upper ranks. Valak, you never had a good grasp of military structure. Then promote her to first lieutenant today, captain tomorrow, major the next day, colonel the day after that, and general the day after that. I'll take it under advisement. The commander flashed me an annoyed glance. I was dawdling, and he had noticed. Anything else? He asked Valak. I finished tasting, placed the commander's tray on the desk, and headed for the door. Valak grabbed my arm. I'd like to try an experiment. I want Yelena to taste the Creolio every time you do for a week. Then, next week, I'll taste it for you. I want to see if anything happens to her when she stops eating the dessert. No, the commander raised a hand when Valak started to argue. I recognise your concern, but I think it's misplaced. Humour me. We can try your experiment once Rand duplicates the recipe from General Brazil. Acceptable? Yes, sir. Good. I want you to join me in a meeting with General Kitvian. We've just started the cooling season and he's already worried about snowcats. The commander's eyes found me. Yelena, you're dismissed. Yes, sir, I said. After stopping at the baths to wash, I visited the kitchen to borrow a large sieve and bowl, which I carried to the library. The remaining 4 pods had turned brown and were starting to rot. So I opened them, scraping out the browning pulp and seeds into the colander, and placed it into the bowl. Its bottom and sides were splendid above the inside of the bowl by the metal handles. The strong odour from the seeds permeated the room. I set the bowl on the windowsill and opened the window to air out the smell. My experiment wasn't based on any scientific research. I just wanted to see if the pulp would ferment. Maybe Brazil was using it to make some kind of alcoholic beverage. My careful reading of the various botany books hadn't revealed anything so far. The poison books, while interesting, had made no mention of butterfly's dust. In 4 different volumes on poisons, I had discovered missing pages, poking up from the binding were ragged edges where the paper had been ripped out. Valak had probably removed all pertinent information long ago in anticipation of the food taster's keen interest in butterfly dust. Sighing, I piled the books at the end of my table. I knew Valak was attending the commander's meeting, so I slid the book of magic out of my backpack. The silver lettering on the title glinted. My stomach knotted. Opening the slim volume, I began to read a technical discussion of the source of magic's power. Unable to understand all of the detailed descriptions, I only sensed that the power source blanketed the entire world, making it accessible from anywhere. The magicians used this power in different ways, depending on their talents. Some could move objects, while others could read and influence minds. Healing, lighting fires, and mental communication were also magical skills. Some could only do one thing, but the stronger the magician, the more the magician could do. A weak magician could only read someone's mind, while a more powerful one could not only read but communicate and even control someone's mind. I shuddered at the thought of Iris controlling my mind. But the magicians had to be careful when drawing power. By pulling on the source too hard or misusing it, a magician could cause creases that could set off a ripple effect. This effect of warping would concentrate power in certain areas and leave other places bare. Fluctuating unpredictably, another wave might reverse the amount of power available. In order to tap the power, the magician would have to seek areas of power, but once they found a pocket, they wouldn't know how long it would remain. The book chronicled a time when a strong magician had tapped into the source, pulling it toward him. Because he was so powerful, he was able to control the blanket without causing an explosion. The other magicians were then uncovered, stripped of their power. They united and searched for him. Once found, and after a battle that left many dead, they tapped into his stolen source and killed him. Eventually, the blanket had smoothed out and returned to normal, but that had taken over 200 years. Fingering the raised lettering on the cover, I now understood why Iris had been so determined that I should either be trained or be killed. When my magic reached a flame out, it would cause major ripples in the blanket of power. I sank deep into my chair, disappointed that the book hadn't contained magic spells or lessons. I had been hoping for an answer, something along the lines of, "This is why you have the power. Here is how to use it. And while we're at it, this is how to conjure up the antidote for butterfly's dust." It had been wishful thinking, plain and simple, dangerous for me to indulge in. Hope, happiness, and freedom were not in my future. They hadn't been, not even as an ignorant child. in Brazil's orphanage. While hoping for a normal life, I had been raised as a laboratory rat for his experiments. I slumped in my chair until the sun set, allowing self-pity to run its course. When the muscles in my legs began to throb with inactivity, I stood and physically shook off my gloom. If I couldn't find the antidote in the books, I would find it another way. Someone had to know something. There had been food tasters on Commander Ambrose's staff for 15 years. If no one could help me, then I would try another way, perhaps stealing the antidote or following Valak to its source. Skills I lacked, but I was determined to learn. The next morning, prepared with an empty stomach, I joined in the flow of jogging soldiers. Ari and Janko breezed past me. Janko flashed a jaunty wave and a mischievous smile. Later, when I heard heavy steps pounding behind me, I assumed Janko was up to no good. I moved aside to let him pass, but the runner stayed close on my heels. I glanced back in time to see Nix thrust his arms out, his hands connected with my back. I fell forward, crashing to the ground. As Nix ran over me, his boots slammed into my solar plex, knocking the wind out of me. Pain bloomed in my chest. I gasped for breath while curled into a fetal position on the ground. Once I regained my wind, I pushed myself into a sitting position. The flow of soldiers remained unabated, and I wondered if anyone had witnessed what that bastard had done. If he was trying to discourage me, he was going about it the wrong way. Nix had just increased my resolve to learn self-defense, so I didn't fall victim to mongrels like him. I stood up and waited for Nick's next circuit, but he never came back. Harry stopped. What's happened? Nothing. Nick's, like Marg, was my problem. If I didn't deal with him, he would never leave me alone. A tingle of doubt touched my stomach. It had been that kind of thinking that had landed me in the dungeon, awaiting execution. Your face is covered with blood, Harry said. I wiped the blood on my sleeve. I fell. Before he could question me further, I changed the subject. By giving him something else to think about, I repeated Valak's advice about concealing our training sessions. Harry agreed it was prudent to go underground. He offered to scout out a suitable location. You're Marion, right? I asked between gasps of air. I had been running laps for a week, and this morning I had timed my pace to run beside Marion. She shot me a quick, appraising glance. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Wide, muscular shoulders atop a thin waist made her figure appear disproportionate. She moved with athletic ease, and I had to scramble to keep up with her long and loping strides. And you're the puker, Marion said. It was an insult aimed with a purpose. Her interest in my response was keen. If she had wanted to dismiss me, she would have made her comment and sprinted away, not bothering to watch for my reaction. I've been called worse. Why do you do it? Marion asked. What? Run till you're sick. 5 circuits are assigned. I don't like to fail. I received another measuring look, with my words coming out as huffs. I knew I wouldn't be able to maintain a conversation for long. I watched you fight Valak. I've heard you're the best with a bow. I want to learn to use one. Who told you that? Her pace slowed. Harry and Janko. Marion snorted as if she thought a con artist had duped her. Friends of yours? Yes. Her mouth formed a small O as she made a mental connection. They found you in the forest. It's rumoured they were training you to fight, but you quit. Are they foisting you off on me? The problem with rumours, I panted, is the difficulty in sorting the truth from the lies. And the reason I'm willing to donate my time, I had anticipated this question. Information. About what? You want to beat Valak, right? Her grey eyes focused on me like two sword points pressing against my skin. With the last of my breath, I wheezed out, "Come to the east entrance of the castle this afternoon at 2, and I'll tell you." Unable to keep up with her any longer, I slowed down. She pulled ahead. I lost sight of her in the press of soldiers. Throughout the rest of the morning, I replayed the conversation in my mind, trying to guess her response as I tasted the commander's meals. At 2 o'clock, I waited in the castle's east doorway, chewing on my lip. Ari and Janko had spread a rumour that my training had stopped. I'd taken a considerable risk by indicating to Marion that this might not be true. When I spotted a tall figure carrying 2 bows heading in my direction, my anxiety eased a little. Marion paused when she entered the corridor. She spotted me leaning against the wall. Before she could comment, I said, "Follow me." I led her to a deserted hallway where Janko and Ari waited. "I guess gossip is not to be trusted," Marion said to Ari. "Nope. But there are certain rumours we would like to keep as is." A thinly disguised threat laced Ari's words. Marion ignored him. "Okay, Puka, what's your information? And it better be good or I'm walking." Ari's face reddened, and I could see that he bit back a remark. Janko, as always, grinned in anticipation. "Well, as I see it, the 4 of us can help each other out. Ari, Janko and I want to learn how to fight with the bow. You want to beat Valak. Working together, we may be able to achieve our goals. How's my teaching you going to help in a match against Valak? You're skilled with a bow, but your fighting tactics need work. Ari and Janko can help you with that. 1 week of training and the Puka thinks she's an expert," Marion said to Ari with an incredulous voice. He remained mute, but his face darkened. "I'm not an expert, but Valak is." She shot me a cold stare. "He said that? About me?" I nodded. "So I teach bow and Ari and Janko teach tactics. What's your contribution?" I gestured to the 4 of us. "This," and I hesitated, unsure if my next statement would have the same sway. "I could teach you some flips and help you to gain greater flexibility and balance that might benefit you in a fight." "Damn!" Janko was impressed. "She's got you there, and 4 does make for a better training group than 3. Annoyed, Marion shifted her focus to Janko. He smiled sweetly at her. "All right, I'll try it on a temporary basis. If it doesn't work, I'm walking." Before anyone could interject, she said, "Don't worry, I may listen to the rumour mill, but I don't participate in it." Once we shook hands on the agreement, my apprehension dissipated. We showed her where we had been meeting for the last week. "Cosy," Marion said as she entered our training room. Ari had found an abandoned storeroom on the lower level in the deserted southwest corner of the castle. 2 windows near the ceiling let in enough light to work by. We spent the remaining time participating the rudiments of bow fighting. "Not bad, Puka," Marion said at the end of the session. "I see some potential." When she picked up her bows to leave, Ari placed a large hand on her shoulder. "Her name's Yelena. If you don't want to call her by her name, then don't come back tomorrow." I could see my astonishment expression My astonished expression mirrored on Marian's face, but she recovered quicker than I did. Nodding curtly, she shook off Harry's hand and walked away. I wondered if she would join us again. She returned the next day and showed up without failing for the next 2 months as we trained together throughout the cooling season. The air held a fresh, crisp scent, and true to the season's name, each day grew cooler than the last. The bright flowers of the hot season wilted while the trees turned orange and finally brown. The leaves dropped to the ground and were blown away by the frequent rainstorms. My research on the pods had stalled, but Valak appeared unconcerned by my lack of progress. On occasion, he observed us training, and he would comment and make suggestions. Nix continued to plague me during my morning run. He threw rocks, he spat on me, he tripped me. I had to change my routine to avoid him by running laps around the outer wall of the castle complex. My defensive abilities were still in the beginning stages and not sufficient for a confrontation with Nix. At least, not yet. There were advantages to running outside the complex. The smooth grass was softer on my feet than the dirt path inside the complex, and by jogging before dawn, I encountered no one, which added to the deception that I had quit training. At the end of the cooling season, the hours of daylight shortened, and our training sessions ended with the setting sun. In the semi-darkness of twilight, I headed to the baths, moving with care to accommodate my bruised ribs. Janko, that annoying jackrabbit, had gotten through my defences with his speedy little jabs. As I approached the entrance to the baths, a large shadow detached from the stone wall. Alarmed, I stepped back into a fighting stance. Fear, excitement, and doubt raced through my body. Would I need to defend myself? Could I do it? Should I run? Marg's ample shape colossaled out of the shadows, and I relaxed a bit. "What do you want?" I asked. "Are you running another errand for your master like a good doggy? Better than being a rat caught in a trap." I brushed past her, exchanging insults while enjoyable was a waste of my time. "Would the rat like some cheese?" she asked. I turned. "What?" "Cheese, money, gold. I bet you're the kind of rat that would do anything for a piece of cheese." So, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed that instalment of Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder. If you would like to see another yarn like this finished in one video, or to hear the next instalments of the Poison Study, please keep an eye out for the next instalment. Thank you all so much for returning and watching. Don't forget, no matter where you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, or night time, I want you to do what you love doing. Love and hugs to all you fantastic people out there, and I'll definitely see you all again very soon. Goodbye, my beautifuls. Mwah.